It's been a wild winter in southern Manitoba, or perhaps a little out of the ordinary might be a better description of weather trends that have seen 30-degree fluctuations in temperature within the span of just a few days, blizzard conditions to rainfall, extreme wind chill to balmy sunshine, and January thunderstorms. Steinbach Scott Kehler is currently studying meteorology at the University of Manitoba and says that while most perceive this current winter as being particularly extreme, it actually pales in comparison with southern Manitoba winters experienced nearly a century ago.
Well, it does seem kind of strange to have that, but if I look back in weather history in Manitoba, we look in the 1930s and see where we were minus 40 for many, many days in a row in terms of the overnight low. And these days in southern Manitoba, it's extremely rare for us to get down to minus 40, never mind for minus 40 many days in a row. So in fact, in the past, in a year like 1936, we would have got down to minus 40 many times a winter, and then turn around, and in summertime we get up into the plus 40s. So in terms of extremes, we're really actually less extreme than we used to be. It might seem like it's more, but really it's not that unusual for us.
So does that mean that the definition of a normal southeastern Manitoba winter has changed over the decades?
Well, something that's interesting in southern Manitoba is that we don't really have normal weather. What we have is an average of extreme weather. So one day we'll have really warm conditions, the next we'll have really cold. And so when we look at normal weather here, it's kind of just an average of the extremes. And so this winter, while it sort of seems a bit abnormal, it's really just another normal winter in southern Manitoba. Warm days, cold days, some in between, but on the whole, it's still a cold place to be in the wintertime.
And while the definition of a cold winter may vary from person to person, according to Kehler, the one constant is the fact that our average temperatures are indeed increasing from winter to winter.
Well, right here in Manitoba, what I can tell you is that since 1990, our winters have warmed considerably. In 1990, our average winter temperature was minus 16 degrees Celsius. In 2010, that average increased almost 2 degrees. We're now almost at minus 14 degrees Celsius for an average winter temperature. So we have seen those winters warm here. I'm not going to say that's because of climate change, because there are many factors that can influence that. But if we were going to look for climate change locally, that's where we'd look at it. Globally, we've seen temperatures rise considerably since the beginning of industrialization. Since then, our temperatures have been almost on a consistent upward trend. In the recent years, the decade from 2000 to 2010 was the warmest on record. And that was coming off of what was a record warm decade prior to that, between 1990 and 2000. So what we've been seeing is a continual upward trend in global temperatures, and that's the key. Even if Manitoba is getting warmer or colder, that's not relevant. What's relevant is what's happening to the entire globe. We need to average that all out. We've been having a cold winter here in Manitoba, but in Australia it's been a record warm summer. So when we average out those two factors and we average out the rest of the world at the same time, we're finding that the world is still very warm, and it continues to get warmer as we put more greenhouse gases into the air.
We've all heard of greenhouse gases, but what effect do they actually have on climate change?
Well, the Earth has a blanket around it called the atmosphere, and the atmosphere is composed of many different gases. One of the big ones is oxygen, which allows us to breathe, and the other big one is nitrogen. But there are also other gases that absorb heat, and those gases are things like carbon dioxide, which is often attributed to global warming. There are other things like methane as well, and CFCs, which were a big issue a while back. So those other greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, and others, are absorbing heat and trapping that in that blanket surrounding the Earth, which is the atmosphere. And as we put more and more of those greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, they're able to absorb more and more heat and trap it around the Earth, causing the Earth to warm. If we look at the trends of greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide has been going up every single year for over 100 years and even beyond 100 years. Methane is increasing even more rapidly than carbon dioxide, and as we continue to pump more and more of these gases into the atmosphere, we're only going to get warmer, because those gases are the only thing that's keeping us warm here on Earth. If we all of a sudden one day took away our atmosphere, the average temperature of the Earth would go from plus 15 degrees Celsius to minus 18 degrees Celsius. The only difference between those two temperatures is all those gases that are insulating us. And therefore, using that logic, the more gas we put into the atmosphere, the warmer it'll get.
So, as far as a worst-case scenario?
Well, the worst case scenario is kind of what the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the World Authority on Climate Change, has described as a 2 degrees Celsius warming of the Earth. And at that 2 degrees Celsius warming point, what happens is climate change begins to run out of control. We can't stop it. At this point in time, we're not quite at that 2 degrees Celsius mark. We're gradually getting closer and closer by the year. But if we do reach that point, the climate change will just all of a sudden start running on its own without our input, and we won't be able to stop it necessarily. So that's the real danger right now, is if we don't stop our activities, climate change could take on a life of its own, and we won't be able to control it anymore.
As far as climate change goes, what is our outlook as we head into the future?
Well, it's just a continued upward trend. If I look at my graphs of global temperatures for the past 150 years or so, it's a clear upward trend. There's really been very few pauses in that upward trend. What you need to look at is what's happening over the entire period that you're looking at, which is from the beginning of industrialization to the current day. And over that period, we're seeing a clear, linear upward trend that really shows no signs of stopping.
For Steinbach Online, I'm Karen Black.